The alien queen sat on her shining crystal throne. Her long silver dress flowed like water. Her skin was smooth and cold, her eyes sharp and glowing. She ruled over millions, yet inside her heart there was a strange emptiness. She had everything: power, beauty, knowledge, but not feeling. Not the one feeling they called the climax. To her, it was a foolish story. A lie told to make people dream. Her doctor said her kind didn't need it, didn't have it. Only the Ancient Ones spoke of it, and all of them were gone. One quiet day, the sky above her palace cracked with fire. A small ship broke through the clouds. Shaking as it crashed near the outer walls, soldiers rushed to the scene, weapons ready. They pulled out a strange creature, weak, bleeding, but alive. It was a human male. She had heard of humans before, but never seen one up close. They were wild, emotional, full of strange habits and sounds. She ordered the man brought inside. When they laid him on the cold table, his eyes slowly opened. He smiled, even though he was hurt. That confused her more than anything else. Why would he smile? At a queen? At a stranger? At death? Do you understand me? She asked him, her voice like ice. He looked at her face for a long time before nodding slowly. "You're beautiful," he said weakly. The room went silent. No one had ever said that to the queen, not like that, not with such softness. She stepped back, her chest feeling strangely tight. It was not fear, not anger, but something else. She left the room quickly, her hands shaking. She told herself it was nothing, just a reaction to seeing something so strange. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Her body was cold, yet her thoughts were hot and fast. She kept thinking about his voice, his smile, his eyes. The next morning, she returned to see him again. He was sitting up, eating the alien food like it was normal. He looked at her again and smiled. "Still beautiful," he whispered. Her heart jumped, though she didn't show it. "What is your name?" she asked. "Eli," he said. "What's yours?" She blinked. No one had ever asked her name before, not like that. "I am Queen Virel," she said slowly. "Nice to meet you." "Queen Virel," Eli replied, like they were equals. She didn't know how to feel about that. She ordered her healers to run tests on him. She wanted to understand how he survived the crash, why he looked so calm, why he made her feel ... strange. She watched the results but found nothing unusual. Still, her body kept reacting whenever he was near. Her skin would warm, her fingers would twitch, and once, when he laughed, she felt a soft flutter in her chest. One evening, she sat alone in her chamber, reading old scrolls. She found the ancient writings that spoke of the climax. They talked about warmth, waves, fire in the veins. A moment of complete release. She had never felt anything close to it. But now, her body was whispering things her mind didn't understand. Could it be real? Could this human somehow awaken something inside her that her kind had long lost? She visited him again. This time, she sat beside him, closer than before. He looked at her, not with fear, but with kindness. "Why are you helping me?" he asked softly. "I do not know," she answered. "Maybe to learn," he nodded. "Then, ask me anything." So she did. She asked about Earth, about love, about pleasure. He told her stories that made her cheeks grow hot. Not from anger, but something else. He reached out, gently touching her hand. It was a small touch, simple, but it made her pull away fast, gasping. Something had jumped inside her, like a spark. She stood up, confused, frightened. "Do not touch me again," she warned. But her voice didn't sound strong anymore. Eli nodded, but he looked at her with eyes full of understanding. "It's starting, isn't it?" he said quietly. She didn't answer. She turned and walked away, but her heart was no longer silent. For the first time in her life, the queen felt something she couldn't control, and that frightened her more than any enemy ever could. Queen Virel stared at her reflection in the dark glass of her chamber. She saw her own glowing eyes, her calm face, but behind that calm was something wild, something waking up. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget the human's touch. His fingers had only brushed hers for a second, but the feeling still burned in her skin. She hated that, and yet she didn't. She had lived 100 years without emotion, without warmth, and now a single human had cracked her armor. She told her guards to prepare the experiment chambers. She said it was to study human biology. But the truth was different. She needed answers not for her people, but for herself. She walked into the white room where Eli sat, looking rested and stronger. His wounds were healing faster than expected. He smiled again when he saw her, as if her cold mood didn't scare him at all. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "Dreams?" She didn't respond, but her silence told him everything. He leaned forward, folding his arms on the table. "Are you here to ask more questions, Queen?" "Yes," she replied softly. "Many." They began with simple tests, she asked him, to describe human feelings, desire, joy, longing, and climax. He explained each one with stories, gestures, and humor. She tried to keep her expression flat, but his words did things to her that no data ever had. When he talked about the climax, she stopped him. "Describe what it feels like," she asked. Voice low, Eli looked at her for a long moment, then leaned even closer. "It's not just a body thing," he whispered. "It's when your body, mind, and heart all scream at the same time." Her breathing grew shallow, and she quickly ended the session. Back in her throne room, her advisors spoke of war, of trade, of security, but she couldn't hear them clearly anymore. Her mind was full of the human's voice, his words echoing deep inside her. She began to lose control during meetings, snapping at servants, ignoring reports. One night, she called for Eli again, not for tests, not for study, but for something she couldn't name. He entered her private chamber, surprised but calm. "You should not be here," she said after a pause. "Then why did you call me?" He asked gently. She didn't know how to answer that. Her body reacted again as he stepped closer, not with fear, but with heat. He reached out, slower this time, giving her the chance to move away. But she didn't. His hand touched her cheek. Warm and careful, her breath caught in her throat. She had commanded armies, silenced rebels, conquered worlds. But now, a single human male had made her body tremble. She closed her eyes, leaning into his palm just a little suddenly. Alarms screamed through the palace. She pulled away fast, the heat inside her turning into confusion. A guard entered with panic in his eyes. "Queen, the elders have sensed it," he said. "Your bond with the human is causing waves through the mind web." She froze. They would know, the ancient minds would know that something was awakening in her, and they would not allow it. She looked at Eli, who now stood tall despite being their prisoner. "You must leave," she whispered. He didn't argue, only nodded, but before he turned to go, he said one last thing. "You can shut it down. Pretend it never happened," he said. "But your body knows the truth now." She didn't answer him. She couldn't. That night, she stood on her balcony, feeling the cold wind on her face. Her fingers still tingled from where he had touched her. She looked out at the stars, wondering why no one had warned her how painful it would be to feel something for the first time, and somewhere deep inside her, a truth whispered louder than any voice. The climax was not a myth. It was real, and it was coming for her. The whispers had started before the sun rose over the crystal towers. They passed through the halls like a cold breeze, soft but sharp. Servants spoke quietly behind walls. Guards exchanged glances without words. "The queen spends too much time with the human," they said. Some laughed nervously, others watched with tight jaws. In a world where feelings were considered weakness, this was more than gossip, it was danger. Queen Varel stood in front of her mirror, brushing her long hair with slow robotic strokes. She had heard the whispers, of course. She always heard everything. But today, for the first time, she did not silence them. She didn't care who noticed her strange behavior. Her thoughts were louder than any voice outside. Her chest felt tight, like something was trying to break free inside. She didn't know what to call it, only that she didn't want it to stop. Eli was awake when she entered his room again. He didn't rise or speak, he just looked at her with Those human eyes that seemed to see things she never showed. She sat down across from him without a word. They didn't speak for minutes, only stared. Finally she said, "They think you've poisoned me." He tilted his head, then gave a small smile. "Did I?" She looked away, lips pressed tightly together. "I don't know what this is," she whispered, "but it's spreading through me." Eli reached forward, not touching her this time, but placing his hand between them on the table. "You're not broken," he said. "You're waking up." His words hit something deep inside her. She had heard of machines waking up, systems booting to life, but she had never thought it could happen to a living being. Not like this, not to her. That night, she dreamed. For the first time in her long, cold life, the Queen dreamed, in her vision. She stood in a field of golden grass, barefoot, laughing. Someone held her hand, Eli, and her body felt so light. She thought she could fly. When she woke up, her heart was racing, her body covered in soft sweat. It felt like she had been pulled from another world, and maybe, in some way, she had. The next morning, her sister, Lady Saraxa, stood waiting in the throne room. Saraxa's face was calm, but her eyes held fire. "You're breaking the rules," she said simply. "You're letting a warm-blooded animal melt your mind." Virel stood from her throne, chin high, voice steady. "He is not an animal." Saraxa stepped closer, her voice rising. "Our people believe the climax is a sickness," she hissed. "You want to bring that madness back?" Virel didn't answer, not with words, but her silence was louder than any scream. Guards began moving closer to Eli's room, watching him with narrowed eyes. Some wanted him gone, others feared him, but none of them understood him. He remained calm, like he knew exactly what was happening, and maybe he did, because that night, as Virel visited him again, he spoke without waiting. "You're changing," he said, "and it scares you." She nodded slowly, her hands trembling at her sides. He stood, walked to her, and stopped just close enough for her to feel his warmth. "You don't have to run from it," he whispered, and for the first time she didn't. She stayed, standing so close her chest nearly touched his. His breath was soft against her cheek. Something in her stomach turned. Not pain, not hunger, but something new. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her hand moved on its own, reaching for his. Their fingers touched, and this time, she didn't pull away. A quiet sound escaped her lips, not a word, just a breath. Filled with confusion and longing, suddenly, her eyes widened, her body trembled, not from fear, but from something hot and wild rushing through her veins. She let go of his hand and stepped back, holding her chest like she was wounded. "What is happening to me?" she whispered. Eli just looked at her, no longer smiling, but serious and gentle. "You're alive," he said. Finally, she ran from the room, heart pounding like a war drum. She didn't stop until she reached her chamber and locked the door. She collapsed onto the floor, breathing fast. Her skin was glowing softly, her body aching in strange places. She looked at her shaking hands and laughed a broken, confused laugh. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew one thing: she would never be the same again. Her feet moved without sound across the cold marble floor. Moonlight poured through the palace windows, silver and soft, but she felt none of its peace. Inside her chest, the Queen felt a storm, a loud, pounding, growing thing she didn't understand. She had touched him again, and something inside her had snapped. She stood now in her private bathing chamber, alone. The room was filled with warm steam, but it could not hide the chill on her skin. She stared at her own hands, still trembling. Slightly, these were hands that had signed death orders, declared war, claimed planets, but one human had made them shake. She did not know whether to be afraid or thrilled. In the silence, she remembered his voice again. "You're alive," he had said. She whispered the words to herself like a curse or a prayer. Alive. What did it mean to be alive? Her body was waking up in ways she never knew possible. Small touches lit fires under her skin. His presence alone made her breath catch. It wasn't sickness, and it wasn't madness. It was something deeper. She reached for the ancient scrolls, hidden inside the wall behind her throne. They were forbidden, but she had the right to access them. Her fingers trembled again as she opened the faded texts. They spoke of an experience so intense, so powerful, that it had once changed entire dynasties, a single moment that joined body and soul. They called it the climax. Long ago, her kind felt it freely, but then they feared it, locked it away, rewrote biology, silenced sensation. They erased it, or so they thought. She ran her finger down the page, reading descriptions that now sounded frighteningly familiar. Heat in the chest, warmth between the legs, aching when the other is near. She stopped breathing for a moment. It wasn't just a story, it was her story. The door to her chamber opened slightly. She turned fast, sharp, but it was only him. Eli stood there silently, as if he had been called by her thoughts. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "but I felt you calling me." She didn't understand how he always knew when to come. Like his body was tuned to hers now, like their energy was locked together. He stepped into the room, walking slowly, carefully. She backed away just a step, but he didn't touch her. He just stood close, eyes soft, voice calm. "You're feeling things you were never taught to handle," he said. "I was not built to handle them," she said coldly. "Maybe not," he said, "but maybe you were built to rediscover them." A long silence passed, thick like night. Fog. Then she moved closer, not because of duty, not because of curiosity, but because something inside her begged for it. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. He placed his hand gently over hers. This time, she didn't shake. This time, she didn't pull away. Her lips were parted slightly, eyes staring into his. He leaned in, just enough, waiting. She closed the distance. It was not a kiss of fire, not fast or wild. It was soft, curious, and terrifying. When their lips touched, her whole body lit up from the inside. Her knees weakened. Her chest tightened. Her mind emptied. She gasped into his mouth and stepped back, clutching the stone wall to stay on her feet. It was too much, too fast, too real. I can't," she whispered, her voice cracking. He nodded slowly, not angry, just watching her with concern and respect. "I know," he said, "but now you've tasted it." Her body was shaking again, not from fear, from release that never completed, from fire that didn't finish. She collapsed onto the floor, knees hitting the marble, gasping for air like she had run 1,000 miles. He knelt beside her, not touching her, just near. "It's the beginning," he said softly. "That's how it starts." She turned her head toward him, eyes wide and wet. A queen who never cried now had tears in her eyes. "I thought I was strong," she whispered. "You are," he said. "Stronger than anyone I've ever met. But I feel weak," she said. "That's what it feels like to open," he answered. She didn't speak again. She let the silence wrap around them, but her hand reached for his once more, not to hold power, not to take control, but just to feel him there, to know this was real. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to be alone anymore. The air inside the throne room felt heavier than usual. The guards stood still like statues, but their eyes followed her every move. Queen Virel walked with slow steps, each one louder than before, not because of sound, but because of what she had become. Her people saw the change, and it frightened them. She took her seat, but it no longer felt like her throne. The cold crystal beneath her offered no comfort now. Her body still remembered his warmth, his lips, the way her skin had come alive. But this was not a place for softness. This was the court of control, a room that crushed emotion before it could breathe. The council of elders stood before her, tall and silent, their minds connected through the ancient web. They had seen what happened. They had felt the pulse in the queen's energy, and now they had come to decide her fate. "You have broken the inner balance," said one elder with glowing blue eyes. "Your bond with the outsider has disturbed the calm of the throne," said another. Virel didn't answer right away. She sat tall, but inside, she was shaking. Again, not with shame, but with fire, the same fire he had awakened. "He is not a threat," she said calmly. "He is a disruption," the eldest replied. "He is the seed of decay." Virel's hands gripped the arms of her throne, her nails dug into the stone. "You fear what you do not understand," she said, her voice louder now. "You fear the return of what we once were." Murmurs passed through the court, advisors shifted uncomfortably. The old records had been locked for ages. The climax was a word not spoken, a concept erased. And now she dared to bring it into the light. "Your feelings are dangerous," the elders warned. "And yet they are mine," she replied. "I will not deny them." Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. 2 guards entered, dragging someone between them. Eli. His clothes were torn, his arms bruised, but his eyes held. No fear. Virel stood from her throne, her voice sharp. "Why is he in chains?" One of the guards spoke without meeting her eyes. "By order of the council, the outsider is to be removed." "Removed?" she asked. "You mean killed?" Silence confirmed her guess. She walked down the steps of her throne, her long gown trailing behind her like a shadow. She stood between the human and the elders, her back to the council, her face toward him. Her hand reached out and touched his cheek gently. Even in chains, he looked at her with calm strength. "You came for me," he said softly. "Always," she replied, her voice cracking. A deep hum began to shake the walls. It came from the mind web. The elders trying to suppress her, trying to push her thoughts down, to crush her will with ancient force. But her mind pushed back. Hard, energy burst from her body like a wave. The guards were thrown to the floor. The council stepped back in shock. The web snapped in half for just a moment, and in that moment, everyone in the palace felt it. A deep, hot pulse of raw sensation. Not anger, not fear, but desire, truth, a living current of what had been forgotten. She turned to the elders, her voice steady again. "If you wish to end me, do it now," she said. "But know this, I will not go back to the cold." The elders stared at her, silent, their glowing eyes dimmer now. They had lost control. The queen was no longer just a ruler. She was a woman reborn. She took Eli's hand and led him from the room. No one dared to stop her. As they walked through the halls, servants turned their eyes away, but they felt something new in the air. A shift, a trembling, a promise that things would never be the same. Back in her private chamber, she helped remove the cuffs from his wrists. Her hands were soft now. She looked into his eyes and whispered, "They will come for us." He nodded. "Then let them come," he said. She leaned forward, their foreheads touching, not in fear, but in unity. Whatever was happening between them, it was no longer just personal. It was the beginning of something greater, something the whole galaxy had tried to erase. But now, it was alive again, and it had a heartbeat asterisk. The first signs were small, almost invisible. A quiet change whispered through the city like a soft wind. Alien women glanced at each other with new, strange looks. Some touched their faces and gasped. Others covered their mouths, afraid to speak. The warmth inside them grew stronger every day. Dreams came to them like forgotten songs. And with those dreams came a feeling they had never known. Queen Virel watched from her balcony, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. She could feel it too, the slow fire building in her chest. Not pain, but awakening. She thought about Eli, about the bond that had started everything. He was more than a man to her now. He was a symbol, a spark. And that spark was lighting a flame across her world. Rumors spread quickly. The council tried to deny the truth. They called it madness, a disease. But no one could stop the change. Alien women began to gather secretly, whispering about hope and freedom. Their eyes held something new: curiosity, desire, courage. One night, in a hidden garden beneath the stars, Virel met with the women. They looked at her with questions and fear. She smiled softly. "I have felt it too," she said. "The power we thought was lost is coming back." They reached for her hands, their touch warm and trembling. She promised them a future where feeling was not a crime, where they could be alive again, but the world was not ready. Whispers of rebellion grew louder. The elders sent guards to break the gatherings. They arrested some women, but the flame inside only grew stronger. Eli was by her side. Together, they faced danger. One day, a group of rebels attacked the palace gates. The queen stood in front of her people, fierce and unyielding, her eyes glowing with the fire of the new feeling. She raised her hand, and the attackers stopped, frozen by the strength she now held. In the quiet after the battle, Ele helped her sit down, her body still weak from the fight. "Your power is real," he said softly, "stronger than any weapon." She looked at him with tired eyes. "And it's only just beginning," she whispered. The change had become unstoppable. The alien world was waking. And at its center was a queen who had finally learned to feel. Asterisk. The great hall was filled with silence heavier than stone. Leaders from many worlds sat stiff and watchful. Queen Virel entered slowly, her steps echoing in the vast room. Her eyes glowed bright with new strength, a light no one had seen before. Behind her, Eli walked calmly, no longer a prisoner, but a mate, not because of chains, but because of choice. The crowd held their breath as she reached the center. She lifted her voice, clear and steady. "No longer will we live in silence," she said. "Our people have forgotten what it means to be alive, but I have found the truth. The climax is not a myth. It is the heart of life itself." Some faces showed shock, others anger, but many eyes shone with hope. She looked at the ancient scrolls one last time, then broke them in her hands. "The lies end today," she declared. "This is a new age for our people." Eli stepped forward, taking her hand. Together, they faced the crowd. "No one will fear feeling again," he said. "Together, we are stronger." The hall erupted not in anger, but in cheers. The old fears began to fade. Alien women smiled, tears in their eyes. They began to feel again, to hope again. Queen Virel turned to Eli, her voice soft. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. He smiled and nodded. "Together, we will change everything." And under the stars, the galaxy held its breath, watching as a new future was born, one where feeling was freedom, and the queen's heart beat loud and proud.